Hey guys, something has finally occurred that I actually wanted to talk about. I was going to make a video about the whole like Hassan and Asmongold saying that streaming is like one of the hardest jobs out there, that entirely idiotic statement and argument that they were making, but I think we all already know how stupid that all of that was. I didn't really feel like I need to make a video on it. Yeah, that was such a L take. It's insane. Trimming is super easy. But now with Nintendo taking down Yuzu, which is a Switch emulator, I actually do have something to talk about because I think that there's a lot of different perspectives on this going down, and I wanted to give mine as somebody who did play Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom is obviously a probably the biggest reason all of this went down. And I did play Tears of the Kingdom. You may have seen I played it in 60 FPS. That is because yes, I did play it on an emulator, but I also did buy a copy of the game, albeit not for myself. I bought it for my uncle because he loves Breath of the Wild and he doesn't game very often, so I picked it up for him. But it was he lives with me, so at any point, if I wanted to, I could have just grabbed the disc, borrowed it, or whatever, and played it on my Switch, which I do have a Switch as well. I have a Switch Lite. So yeah, I entirely legally played this on an emulator, but I wanted to talk about emulators in general, the legality of them, some of the arguments about them. But I think the first thing that's important to say here is that I completely agree with Nintendo in taking down Yuzu. Yuzu were, I mean, there's no nice way to say this. They were fucking morons. Uh, Essentially what they did was, yes, they made a Switch emulator, which is totally fine, but then they had a Patreon where they were making $30,000 a month, at least recently. I have no idea if this was higher previously or not, but as of making this within the last week or so, like before it got taken down, they were making $30,000 a month. And on this Patreon, they had essentially exclusive, like early access to builds. They had access to their Discord where they would help people with piracy. And so all of this obviously is just completely illegal. Like okay, you cannot make you can make an emulator totally 100%, but once you start charging for the ability to play these games and giving advice on piracy and how to use the thing that you've created for illegal purposes while making $30,000 a month. Yeah, that's the final nail in your coffin. So I actually do agree that Yuzu should have been taken down here. Now, I don't think something like Ryujinx, which is another Switch emulator, I don't think that's going to get taken down because yes, they do have crowdfunding, but they're not. That's purely if you just want to support them. Like that you're getting nothing special from that. From everything that I have seen, at least, they are not like recommending people to pirate or anything. But I do think it's important to say I actually do agree with Nintendo that Yuzu had a major fuck up there, and I think it makes complete sense to take them down as a result. They are profiting off of essentially illegal stuff. But with that being said, I've used emulators a lot. I actually, when I'm trying to sell people on making the swap to PC gaming, I use emulators as a big part of the discussion, as a big way to, you know, a big benefit for PC gaming. I think emulating is great. And let me tell you why I think it's great. First things first, in a case of Tears of the Kingdom, um, if I purchase the game for my Switch or something, I play it on the Switch, and then I go, I'm really not satisfied with the performance on display here, which I'm not. I'll be honest, my Switch barely gets any use as a result. I think the only time I ever use my Switch Um, well, no, I don't even do that now that I have a Steam Deck. Before I had a Steam Deck, the only time I would use my Switch is like on flights and stuff like that. But now that I have a Steam Deck, I don't even use the Switch for that. But I think that's really one of the only purposes for it, other than the exclusives. But the problem is that most of the exclusives run like shit, or they look like shit, or both. And in the context of both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, I was just not at all satisfied with the performance that the Switch, displays. Now, yes, is it impressive that Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild even runs on a machine as technologically feeble as as the Switch? Yeah, it is. And it's a marvel of engineering that that the software engineers managed to get the game to run the way that it does. But with that being said, I have a several $1,000 PC, and if I have the ability to play a game at a much higher performance, just much better looking visuals, 4K, 60 FPS, then I'm going to do that. Also, there's mod support through through emulating, which is one of the highlights of every PC game. I mean, it's another one of the reasons I use when I'm trying to sell people on making a PC is because mods are fantastic. You can take a game where I would not be able to sit through 10 hours of it like Starfield, and you can make it into a significantly improved experience to where I can put in 70 hours for completion of the game, right? Modding is fantastic, and through emulators and stuff like that, modding a Zelda game is no different. It's fantastic. One of the mods that I used for Tears of the Kingdom was there's these like wings that you can glide on, and for some sad reason the limit on them before they like disappear is significantly less than everything else in Tears of the Kingdom. So I got a mod that just brought it in line with the durability of every other Zonai device in the game, and that improved the experience immensely. At least before everybody figured out the little hover bike, because that became the god tier traversal option. But before that, when you're trying to make these gliders and stuff like that, that mod helped immensely, and improved my enjoyability of the game by a ton. So that's another wonderful thing about modding. Also, the preservation of game. Let's face it, physical media is slowly but surely disappearing. And unfortunately, it's due to consumers. It's actually not even due to these publishers and these developers, although they obviously want this to happen because it's more money for them, right? It's much better for them if you have to download a game and it's tied to your account so you can't share it or whatever with your friends or buy it used. And us as consumers, not me, but a lot of you fuckers, are encouraging that because you see a system that's $100 less, whether it's the PS5 or the Xbox. You see the system that's $100 less or $200 less, and you go, "Oh yeah, that does. I don't care. It doesn't have a disc drive," and you buy it anyway, right? So, unfortunately, a lot of people have bought the PS5 all digital, and a lot of people have bought the Xbox One Series S, I think it is, the one with no disc drive. And so we are slowly but surely seeing physical media get fizzled out. And that's going to make it so games just disappear. I mean, we're already seeing this with certain Super Nintendo games, or hell, even as recently as GameCube games. There's some GameCube games that are actually very hard to get your hands on, and you're going to pay a very pretty penny if you want to be able to play them. Add on top of that, there's no way to download these games normally, right? It's not like they have some version that I can just buy on the Switch. And you have yourself a situation where if I want to play something like Tetris Attack, a very niche title for the Super Nintendo, but one of my favorite video games of all time, I'm going to have to fork over an arm and a leg in order to play this game if I can even find it at all, right? Like a great example, I just sold a copy of Brigadine, a PS1 game that sold for well over $200 for a game as recent as PlayStation 1, right? That was just, 20 something years ago. Now imagine how expensive these games are going to be in another 20 something years, right? It's going to be astronomically more expensive if it's to the point where they're on sale at all. So emulation allows us to play these games without having to break our bank account and play them. And let's be real, the developers are not getting any of that money anyway. It's not any money lost on the development teams, or in this case, more likely the publishing teams, because Tetris Attack is never coming back. As much as it breaks my heart, and as much as I absolutely love and adore Tetris Attack, that game is never coming back. And as a result, Nintendo is making $0 off of it. And even if I do spend 100, 200, $1 million on a copy of Tetris Attack, Nintendo is not seeing a single lick of that. So emulation makes a lot of sense here. We can preserve games, and then people can play the games, forever. And it's a wonderful facet of emulation that I really like, because it does allow me to play those games from my childhood. And I don't think there's really anybody that loses here other than resellers, right? And I don't think that that's a large amount of people at all. And this is another thing that this brings me to is I've gotten in a couple conversations online, and people have said, well, it's piracy is a serious issue, right? A lot of people that use emulators are pirating. And I just don't think we have any statistics to back up that statement. I think it's an entirely baseless statement, but I would be inclined to agree. I think it's probably true in the case of something like a Switch emulator. I think it's probably true. A lot of people using a Switch emulator are going to be using it for piracy reasons. However, where I push back a little bit is this idea that it's a huge problem. And the reason why I don't think it's a huge problem is because the actual numbers behind it are trivial, like compared to the number of copies that sell. And this has kind of always been my argument against piracy in general, is that, people say PC gamers are all pirates or whatever, and just the numbers don't back it up. Like, the amount of people that pirate games is significantly less than the people who buy games. The people who buy games outnumber, the people that are pirating them by so much. It's insane. And devs have came out and spoken about this, what's his name? The dude with the very long hair, Thor. I don't remember his channel name. I'm sorry. I'm sure you've seen a million YouTube shorts of him. He's just in the algorithm, right? He's a game dev. He's spoken about piracy. I've seen piracy spoken on in the Play Watch Listen podcast by like Mike Bithell, who's a game developer. And the numbers are just not actually that high in terms of who's pirating a game compared to who's buying it, right? If we say that, if we look at Tears of the Kingdom, for example, the game sold 10 million copies in like 3 days. It sold over 20 million copies by the end of December of that year. So the game has sold millions upon millions upon millions of copies. The amount of people emulating the game through piracy is such a small number compared to any of those sales metrics that I just don't really think it's this huge problem that's actually significantly impacting the bottom line of Nintendo. I think it's a little silly to say that. And I think that if it's not a big problem, people say the numbers don't matter, but the numbers do matter, because the numbers show the severity of the problem. If a development team is losing millions and millions of dollars due to piracy, yes, that's a serious issue. If they're losing a few $1,000s or something when they're selling tens of millions of units, that's obviously a much smaller issue. And honestly, I don't think a lot of people are pirating Tears of the Kingdom or any Switch games because the PC required to emulate a Switch game is very strong. Like, emulation in general takes a lot of resources from a computing perspective, and emulating a Switch game is significantly more resources, right? You're talking having minimum an $800 PC in order to even get a Switch comparable performance here. And I think that most people that are emulating the game don't want Switch quality performance because they would just play it on the Switch. The reason they're emulating is because they want to play it at higher FPSs or higher resolutions. So you need a minimum of $800 PC, and that's saying you're shopping for deals. I've built a lot of PCs over the past couple of years, and prices are pretty damn high, man. That's saying you're really finding deals and you're buying used stuff. Realistically, you're spending over $1,000 on your PC, and I just don't see that number being very high. The number of people that have a PC capable of Switch emulation is just not a very large number. At least if you look at the Steam hardware survey details, which all of that is publicly available, and essentially Steam uploads, I believe, every month a breakdown of every single PC part for people that are using Steam. And you'll see through those stats that the number of people that actually own a PC that's capable of successful Switch emulation at a level that's even remotely comparable to the Switch is laughable at best. It's a very small amount, and that's of people already on Steam. So I just think the whole argument is silly, and the benefits of emulation far outweigh any possible negative, right? It's like blaming, the gun for the shooter. It's just absolutely silly. At least any logical person would not do that, right? Any logical person is blaming the shooter, not the tool, or the fucking stabber themselves, not the kitchen appliance, right? I mean, that's just pretty logical of a step to take, in my opinion. I know there's a lot of people out that are making other arguments, but I think most, intellectual individuals will say it is the user, not the tool. And as a result, I think that emulators are one of the greatest things that PC has at its disposal. I think it's fantastic to be able to play all these games from my childhood, games that a lot of them I still own the copies of, right? And even in a situation where it is a new game, I think it's great that I could buy a game, I could rip the ROM, and then I could play it at, double the FPS and quadruple the resolution. I don't know what Tears of the Kingdom runs at, but I know it's sure as shit is not anywhere close to 4K. So yeah, I think all of these arguments are just very silly against it. I agree that Yuzu should have been taken down, but I've just seen so much like anti-emulator speech through comments online, through videos people have posted. I just think it's silly. I think emulators are fantastic, and they are just merely a tool that people can use. Do some bad individuals incorrectly use the tool? Yes. As with practically every single tool out there. But I don't think the number of people using that tool nefariously is significant in any way, shape, or form. I think it is a much smaller number than people actually think, just like with regular PC piracy, right? I don't think that number is very high, and every single metric that we have has suggested that that number is not very high and that it does not accurately impact the actual like performance and sales of a title, right? They're completely different demographics usually. The demographic of people that's going to pirate a game like day one is not the same demographic as the people who are going to buy a game day one. They're not. And as a result, it does not impact sales because the people who have the money and who have the ability to purchase a game day one are just going to purchase the game day one, right? That's just how it is. So, anyway, I just wanted to talk about this over the whole Asmongold Hassan being a streamer, wah wah, so hard, or shit that also happened. You know, as funny as it would have been to make that video and just talk about, just really break down how idiotic that entire thing was. I thought, you know, what's the point in that? Because I think everybody knows both of them are pretty stupid for saying that. So let's talk about something a little more nuanced with actually a little bit more discourse surrounding it with the topic of emulation. But anyway, thanks for stopping by, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll see all of you in the next video or stream Rooney. Bye bye.